we need to specify how it's going to be reduced.
Okay, those are my questions. I have comments to make later on.
My comments are somewhat different. My step is equal to 2.5 feet when I walk. And it's actually relatively accurate. And some time ago, I measured, using that method, which I agree might not be accurate to 1%, but using that method, I measured the site of the main house to see whether or not 10,000 square feet would in fact impact any green areas. And when I did that measurement, I found I could get 10,000 square feet in there without impacting any green areas. And therefore, in my mind, as a library, I don't think it's talking about a size of more than 10,000 square feet. My belief is that they can put a library in there without impacting any green areas. Now that's an empirical measurement on my part. And you know, I'm not saying it's totally accurate, but in the past I found that it's pretty accurate.
Mike? Oh,
Can I take
yeah,
a
sure, go ahead.
So my questions, and then I'll have comments later. In item number 1, you are talking about it will not exceed 10,000 square feet. So is that an arbitrary number? I mean, is that just something, because they're talking about between 6,000, 9,000 and 15,000 square feet. So a 10,000 square feet. And if you, that's kind of an arbitrary number. I see Lisa kind of shaking her head, yeah.
Well, it's sticking my head in the range, isn't it?
Yeah, oh, okay. And then the available size on the site, the available site plan, is that determined from setbacks, or who determined that? Although the available site is greater than 10,000 square feet as shown on attachment 1, which I'm understanding is the dashed line. Is that what the dashed line is?
The dashed line
Is the available site?
is what we drew in our interpretation of the hardscape area. And the area,
And that is larger than 10,000 square feet?
yes, that is approximately 15,000.
So you're saying that the house and this dashed line that I guess includes this parking lot, isn't this like a parking lot right here?
It's asphalt pavement, yes.
It's where people walk and park, and then the concrete patio, and then there's all these trees that are in the way, right?
Correct.
Right. But then if you take your 10,000 square foot key and cut it up and actually put it onto the building and the patio, right? You're kind of left with that little bit left over, 10,000. So the building and the patio is less than 10,000 square feet. But then there's all this other, what you're calling asphalt or walkways and stuff. Hardscape, right. So I just want to know, you know, where that came from. And number 2, you talk about the Hoboken Park master plan. We're talking about the landscaping master plan, right?
There's only one master plan that I'm aware of.
Which is a landscaping plan.
That was recommended by the Park and Rec Commission, and I believe accepted by the City Council.
It's a landscaping plan, right?
It shows spaces, uses, and yes, landscaping.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And, okay, but it's a landscape. And then for number 3, it does seem a little presumptive to list and narrowly list the potential new uses for the existing library. Who made this determination? And I don't believe that that's really been decided. You're asking us to decide that and to rule on that now. And then, if that's the case, who's going to pay for the seismic upgrade of that building? Yeah. Once the library vacates.
Well, if when it's done, To me, that would be the responsibility of the town, since it is a county facility.
Town doesn't have any.
And the list of uses that are suggested, obviously, we're coming to you for some direction, but we want to give you something that you can, chew on. It's really based on what the permitted uses are under the zoning code.
And so
So
why
if
does
you wanted to
this,
think of other uses, we may
Right.
need to amend the zoning code to include other uses. But community uses could be considered permitted, so I had a call, somebody asking about a senior center, for example.
Mhm.
That could be something that could be considered community use and could be permitted. So we're looking for some direction from the council on that.
why can't it just be left open? Why does it have to be decided now?
Well, we need to understand what the intended use of that building is for traffic purposes, for generation of traffic. So if you're gonna say that building would be left vacant or it would be demolished, then we would need to understand that for the traffic analysis. Or if there would be some intense use in there, we need to factor that in.
Could I just interject to amplify on her answer here? The previous traffic plan had assumed new uses for the library. There was a revision in September that said, oh no, it won't be for new uses because that helped trigger a significant impact on some of the intersections by having additional traffic. And so it and two other items were adjusted in September of the revised plan. And what's being proposed here is goes along with all the adjustments that were made at that time.
And then,
Kathy?
Number one, with regard to the building footprint, actually, it wasn't going to be limited to the 10,000 square feet so that they could study it just generally. The 10,000 square feet came in because when they went back over the minutes, they noticed that you had said 10,000 square feet. And so that's why it was added, because that was what was agreed to by the council, and that's how that was put in there. Number two, with regard to the footprint of the new library and the revision of the master plan, I was the one that made the motion, and that's what I was talking about. With regard to number three, the reason they put that in there is because they need something to study. They could say it's going to be demolished, and that would be great. They don't have to study anything. There wouldn't be any impact. This is so that they expose it to the most difficult test possible for the purposes of the community. And so that's why they put not just one of those things, but everything they could possibly think of. And if you can think of anything more, by all means, add it. We would like to see fewer things because it would make it easier from an EIR standpoint, but we asked them to actually put in as much as they could, and we took the lead from the task force and went back to their committee notes and added everything that we thought that they had discussed. For example, Mr. Dosart said the task force had regular input from the library task force liaison and took into consideration the possible opportunity of that building becoming available. The task force recommends using it as town storage if it were to become available to free up space in the proposed facilities. That's how town storage came about. We followed the lead of the task force. The other thing was we listened to Phil Warrens, and he wrote in his report, option number 3, renovate and expand the library to accommodate planning, building, public works. Council chamber remains as is, and that would lower the cost of the new building. That's how those options came in. And Neil Martin came up with some others, and if you remember, we had a suggestion of it being used for an arts center by one of our previous council members. So everybody thought up everything they'd ever heard of. Public use, we were thinking about the housing element and some of the things they suggested. Everybody came up, everything they'd ever heard of they could possibly use for, and that's what was thrown in there. It was for the benefit of the town and trying to be as responsive as we possibly could that those suggestions were made. But if you can think of more, by all means, throw them in.
All right, I have a couple comments as well. When we were having the original vote on the library, I went out and the library committee actually had staked out some spaces that showed a 100 by 100 square foot facility. I went out with my own tape measure and measured to make sure there was valid.
A little bit better than your feet.
I think it was more accurate.
Yeah, it was.
Mine was 40 by 40 steps.
Okay, all right. Well, I actually used a tape measure, and it is pretty close to the building. There is one evergreen tree that I think actually gets impacted there. But for the most part, you know, depending on the size of the building, if it's irregular shaped as opposed to a perfect square, I could see where 10,000 square feet would hit the hardscape and not affect the tree that really is in question. So the 10,000 square feet, to me, doesn't impact the green space, the usable green space in the park. You know, if it takes 10 feet of grass here or there, I can't see that that can be used for putting in a soccer field, for example. I like Councilmember McKeithen, remember the Blue Ribbon Task Force and the documentation and that indicated that the library, if it was moved, actually could be used for other town activities, and that was specifically stated. Lastly, I guess as far as the question on who should be paying or who could potentially pay for the seismic retrofitting of the existing building should somebody want to use it. My understanding is the JPA allows for renovations to that building, and so actually the money could actually come from the library committee. According to a quick read that I did earlier today on the JPA agreement. So hopefully we've answered a few questions.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
could I ask Lisa to comment on the other elephant in the room, and that is that the existing library building is considered to be eligible for listing as a historic resource. And because of that, the consultants made that call, not the staff, but because of that, it does limit what can be done with that structure feasibly as well. Lisa, you might want to comment on that too.
Right, I mean, it would be very difficult to tear it down. We may need to have a statement of overriding considerations, but then the renovation may need to meet certain architectural guidelines. But the seismic upgrade would in most about fit in with those architectural guidelines.
I would think that because we've known for a number of years that both this building and that building are both seismically unsafe, that if in fact there was ever any sort of seismic activity here and people were hurt, the town would be very liable. So something needs to be done because we've known about that situation for a number of years, so we're going to need to do something sooner or later. So we can't keep pushing our head in the sand, but regardless. With regards to this clarification, my understanding is this clarification is really to give a guideline. There are going to be other sites, perhaps in the park, perhaps in other town facilities, and this is just really limiting the size of the library, and it's not necessarily segmenting this is the only spot, for example, in the park that the EIR is looking at, nor any other spot that they're looking at, perhaps here in the town center area, right? They're looking at 4 or 5 different locations, if I remember from the conversation last
Right,
month.
there's multiple sites that are going to be evaluated as the alternative sites, but we look to you, the council, as our project applicant. And as the applicant, we need you to define the project that we're analyzing, and then we also analyze alternatives as well.
Right, but what we're doing though with the 10,000 square feet is putting a limit that size would not be any greater than that, because at one time they were talking about 14,000 square feet or something even larger.
Well, we are looking at 10,000 as the footprint, and I believe the range goes to 13,500 for the total building size, so there would be a small second story component.
But Neil has explained that's only for purposes of the EIR
Correct.
exploring.
Yeah,
We're
what we
not
need to,
seriously considering.
what we need to analyze in the EIR is the largest you might possibly want to build, so that we look at the worst case traffic scenario, greenhouse gases, everything else. If we analyze a 7,000 square foot building, we want to build an 8,000 square foot building, we have an issue. So we do want to look at the largest possible building. We want to
It puts it to the most stringent test.
But we could say 10,000 square feet is it, right?
You're the applicant.
And Mr.
And
Mayor,
clarify that.
Mr. Mayor, we need you to clarify, when you say 10,000 square feet is it, 10,000 square feet on any floor or basement, or 10,000 square foot of floor area? Footprint.
Okay, so my question about the footprint is that the footprint of the building wall to wall, or does it include the outdoor gardens or patio, reading patios, and ingress, egress, the walkways, the stairs, the walk around the building? Because you know, is it drip line to drip line, or is it, you know, the entire building including outdoor reading patios, stairs, walkways, and things? Because that could encroach more.
But Elizabeth, I think if there were outdoor patios and outdoor gardens, as long as
That's
they
not
were,
green space.
that's, no,
No,
as long
it's
as they were
hardscape.
done appropriately, I think they're public, they're open to the public. And therefore, they might be an enhancement to the whole park.
It
Well-
takes away, and so if you look at what the first page says, that the library will be the exact same size as the main house so that no green space is lost.
That's right.
And that was approved by.
Yes,
That's for the
and in,
library building.
and in the next
So my
step,
question is the footprint 10,000 square feet, or does the footprint include the garden area, the outdoor patios, the walkways, the stairs, the ingress, egress, which is not green space, but it is accessible?
it's the footprint, and
It's the
anything else will
See,
be
I-
decided by the public.
That's,
Well, if the footprint, because we discussed this in the meeting, if the footprint includes a garden area that has walls around it that no one else can use but library users, I think we included that in the 10,000 square feet. So if they wanted to build a green space or an atrium area, or have an area outside and they were gonna put walls around it so people couldn't throw books over the wall, or these iPads that we're gonna buy, that would be considered part of the 10,000 square feet.
An enclosed area.
Right.
well, that's what I'm trying to clarify. Is
Well, I'm
it-
trying to clarify.
Thank you very much. Drip line to drip line, or is it the,
I
you
think
know, walls or
until we
the?
get more information on the proposed design of the library, we won't really know the answer.
Yeah, but you're asking some pretty
I
specific
think
questions.
we can say it's the footprint of an enclosed area of the library.
Right, I think that's fine.
If there's a walkway that leads up to it, I don't think we should include that.
Well, that
Because
takes away
anybody
green
can-
space.
Everybody can use a
But
walkway.
it's taking away green space.
But there's,
No.
but what we said was, as you said, drip line to drip line, including any, includes gardens.
Can, Mr. Mayor, can I make one
Sure.
additional comment?
I'd like to make comments after this.
I am concerned at the present time, seriously concerned, about the safety of our present library. And especially, you know, I don't think we ever look at the upstairs part of the library, but there is an upstairs there. And I think we have young children there and all the time. I've just, one of the residents told me he'd inspected some parts of the roof and that the roof tiles weren't even nailed down. And, you know, one of these roof tiles, frankly, could kill a child if it slips down. So I think as a council, maybe we don't want to do anything, but we want to make sure that that library is safe. And I'm not at all sure it is at the present time, and I would hate to see any of us, but especially young children, get hurt because of some defect in the library. And I'm just bringing this up. It's not exactly maybe the agenda item, but it certainly is something that I think we should be very concerned about.
That's a very interesting comment, Councilman Dhabi. If we do consider that a critical thing, we should certainly agendize that at a future meeting and decide, okay, what do we do in the interim between now and when a future library is available? Because if it's going to be dangerous, we ought to take action on it. And, you know,
I completely agree.
I wanted to make a few more comments about, you know, earlier it was mentioned that the town center size had not yet been determined. The library project has been going on much longer in terms of a funded project. And the size of the library hasn't been decided yet. The proposed size of the library is still based upon an earlier, a needs assessment was funded by the county library that said, okay, the new Atherton library is going to have to serve the needs of 9,000 residents in the unincorporated area, as well as 7,000 residents in Atherton. And therefore, a new library needs to be a size that in approximate what's being talked about today. We still haven't it still hasn't been brought to the council, the policy question of using taxpayer money to fund, subsidize a library that half the size, more than half the size, would be on for the county's benefit. So this whole size thing is really a perplexing thing that hasn't been nailed down yet. And if it was sized just on what Atherton residents needs being serviced, it'd only have to be about 6,000 square feet, and could easily fit on the main house and hardscape site there in the park. The second item I've already covered, I think, that Mike, I think, is answered it satisfactorily. The Park and Rec will get a chance to review the item. But if we want to really look at the third item and worst case, then we should assume that there will be new uses. That would be the worst case. To assume that town will be using the current library is not the worst case. So if you want to stick to your guns on this and factor in the worst case, then you need to factor in new uses. Thank you.
Any other council comments?
I'm glad Jerry raised the idea of the size of the library, because we are presently having people, Kathy Page is looking at reassessing the potential size of the library based upon her expertise, and we're going to be having sessions for the public come the new year, where public input from Atherton residents as to what they want to see, as well as library experts, of which I am not one, and I didn't know Jerry had so much library expertise. Because I don't know that it's 6,000 square feet would serve Atherton residents, but hopefully together with library experts and Atherton residents, we can come to a better idea of what an Atherton library should look like.
So why don't we have public comments? Are there any public comments? Charles?
Sir, what? Yeah. Well, if you're here, I guess that was the legacy of 10 years working on this stuff, so give me my thoughts. And I guess the thought is, Jerry, one thing you said about the size, if you have a children's reading area, performing area, I went to some of those events, and you're going to have, you can't just say only Atherton people can have a ticket to go to that event. So if there's a concert or something else that they do, and they do some great activities, you're going to have to still build that room big enough for the whole attendance crowd. And I imagine on some of the other things, you can't say we're only going to have 4 computer stations because that accommodates Atherton residents, when you got to let everyone in that needs a computer station to work. So I think the size concerns might have some other variables in there. I would agree with what Elizabeth said, that when we looked at the size and not taking up any more hard space, that's because this patio area is considered hard space. But when you compare a building that's 10,000 square foot without adding the walkways and the other things, you're going to be probably taking away some yard and grass and other areas. So you should do that. And maybe, I know you guys have been out there, but maybe you want to put some stakes out there so that the public could go out and look and say, this is what it's going to look like. This is the footprint that it takes. And as we're doing all this evaluation and EIR and getting input, that might be a good way to let the public see what the footprint looks like. And finally, I had gone to, and I guess why I speak is, I went to several libraries, Belmont and Portola Valley, a few other ones, Millbrae, to look at what they do in Menlo Park, and you have an outdoor area. It's great because we have such great weather here. So you are going to want an outdoor area. There's probably hardscape to put benches on where people read, and whether or not it's fenced in or not, you're still going to need it. So that becomes an area where I would leave the room for that. I would also, in doing that, then indicate if there are any trees or anything else that is needs to be removed to accommodate parking or landscaping or walkways, because once you add those, it seems that this 10,000 does go right up to the tree line, and you might need to remove a few trees when that happens. And that's, the building over here, when we were doing the Blue Ribbon Task Force, one of the main reasons was we felt we had some problems with staff because staff was in a different building and the city manager's over here. So I don't think putting the building department over there is a good idea, given all the problems we thought we were having with the building department not being supervised. And if you're going to share things, I would try to keep those together rather than move the building department further away from the city manager so that when he can have access and supervision to that staff. Thanks.
Sure. Oh.
Can I say something?
It's up to you. It's often let everybody talk and then the council can respond to all the comments.
But I just don't want to forget this. May I?
Sure.
With regard to 3 computer stations and children's events and letting everybody in and some of those comments, that's exactly why we're in the process of an EIR, revision to a master plan with public comment, a scoping session with regard to size, a campaign of public education and input, and an exacting months of public input for the next 6-8 months. We don't know whether children's programs are going to take place in a library or people want it in the pavilion if it were to be in the park. We don't know if they want 3 computer stations or if they want 12 computer stations. I almost said 24, but that would frighten everybody because if the 24 would go in the newspapers and that would be the number everybody would start focusing on. And 10,000 square feet doesn't go up to the tree line. That square is 15,000 square feet that goes up to the tree line. So, all those ideas are wonderful suggestions perhaps, but they're nothing but one person's suggestions, just as all of these things so far have been suggestions, and we really need to get public input, which is the stage that we are at in accordance with all of these various processes that are in the process of taking place and are about to be furthered in the next few months.
Okay. So, other public input on this specific item?
Valerie Gardner. I'm glad Jerry Carlson brought up mention of a needs assessment. And I think this is a good opportunity to weigh in on the needs assessment, which kind of defined the scope of this project and the needs of Atherton community. However, I read the needs assessment, which is a 105-page document produced by the library JPA, according to a lot of studies that they have done external to Atherton. It only very minorly reflects the fact that it's based upon a survey sent out in 2009 for 1 month that got 170 people to respond to it, of which 70 were Atherton residents. And in the needs assessment report itself, they even say it's statistically not significant. However, of the 70 Atherton residents who responded, 40 identified themselves as friends of the library. And in total, all the comments summarized by the needs assessment pointed to the fact that everybody loved the quaint size of our library and the feel of it being a local library that wasn't one of those McMansion libraries in the towns surrounding us, and they didn't actually specify wanting it bigger. This was an interpretation that the JPA put as an overlay on the findings of the survey to define that the library needed to be doubled, tripled, or quadrupled, or this time we're talking about 5 times the size of our 4,800 square foot library. So when we look at size, I think we need to filter the information that we get from the needs assessment report which is clearly a document produced by people who want to have a very big library in Atherton and has not in any way a reflection of community input from this town. I also, for my last comment, spoke to the town manager in Portola Valley who's gone through this process. And in their community town center, which included their library, they had the JPA define a library much bigger than what they actually ended up building. And they did go through a community input process that was meaningful to define the size of the library and came up with something much smaller that everybody is happy with. Thank you.
Are there any other public comments?
Denise Kupperman, 74 Atherton Avenue. And I know that these comments really relate to the topic at hand, which is really defining the site for the EIR study. But I would like to clarify a couple of things that keep coming up in this process. And one is the needs assessment was a very initial first step. And the purpose of that needs assessment was to determine whether or not the library, as we have it, is serving our community in the way that it deserves and in the way that we're paying. And that needs assessment determined that our existing library is not serving our community in the way it should and in the way that our county library would like to serve our communities in general. And then it made a recommendation that we have a new library, and it made a recommendation of a particular size. And that size is based on not just the survey, but 5 other measures. So I just want to reiterate those particular facts, and I encourage you to look at the needs assessment in full and the entirety of the study. Secondly, with regards to Portola Valley, yes, they did do a needs assessment. There was a recommendation of a particular size. The library was made smaller. And there were a number of residents that went up to the Portola Valley Library to take a look at it. And subsequently, they have made a determination that they are regretful that they did not quite make it large enough. The Portola Valley Library is about 6,700 square feet, and they are short already on some of the spaces. So I just wanted to sort of reiterate those facts. They are off the topic really of what is at hand, but I couldn't help myself. Thank you for listening. And I wish the council a very happy holiday, and I thank you for all that you do for the town. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Okay, with that, we'll come back to the council and for final discussion and then a motion. Any other comments, Joe?
Well, I have read the needs assessment from cover to cover, and I don't know the tables in the needs assessment that use population numbers to assess the amount of square feet needed for various uses. And 16,000 was the figure that was used there, which is over twice the number of residents we have in Atherton. I think that the other comments I made earlier about item 2 and 3 still stand. I think I'll do my remarks right there.
Nothing.
I just also want to iterate that I too have read the needs assessment, and I just want to clarify that it was 148 responses of the public in a 1-month period between October and November of 2009, at the height of when the Atherton residents were being asked to vote on renewing the parcel tax, and they did not. Only 65 residents responded to this needs assessment. So based upon that, I believe that the needs assessment document is flawed. It should not be used as a benchmark of what the residents of Atherton truly want in their library. And if you read the comments at the back, which are many of them handwritten notations by people saying they love the quaintness, they love the smallness, they love the intimacy, they love the little library, and they are not asking for bigger, more grandiose. Like here with a large library and footprint of this size in the middle of the park, if you look at how close it's going to get to the water tower, it encroaches quite significantly to where the water tower is, which is a historic structure in the park, that the library footprint of this 10,000, and as Councilmember McKeithen said, the available site area is really more than 10,000 square feet, so it can encroach that much, and green space will be lost, and it will be a giant new building in the middle of the park where we need fields, and we need playing fields, and we need more green space. And my sense is that just like what William Brindley was reporting with the rail information, that the more the people begin to know about the high-speed rail, the more they want to get rid of it. 88% of those who know the most about the high-speed rail want to get rid of it. I am finding that the more residents know about the library plans to put the library in the middle of the park like this in a big building, the more they want to get rid of it. I believe that a survey should be done. I believe that we need to poll the residents. I believe we need to be very careful about these decisions.
I think that's off topic.
Okay, so, getting back on topic, that the available site and agreeing that the available site includes this more than 15,000 square feet hatch mark is contrary to what is actually written in number 1. And so